Ontario becomes the second province to declare a state of emergency. It is in response to the growing number of COVID-19 cases. Premier Doug Ford says it's an attempt to help stop the spread of coronavirus and basically flatten the curve. And we've talked about that before. Right now, Ontario has the most cases in the country at 177.
We're facing an unprecedented time in our history. This is a decision that was not made lightly. COVID-19 constitutes a danger of major proportions. We're taking this measure because we must offer our full support and every power possible to help our healthcare sector fight the spread of COVID-19.
CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick is on the story live from the Ontario Legislature, and you were there, Megan, for that Ford announcement. What does it mean for the province?
Well, let's go through sort of what's going to be open and closed now, Suhana, in the wake of this announcement. So what will be closed effective immediately, according to the Premier, are bars and restaurants, but they are allowed to stay open for takeout and delivery. Daycares, licensed daycares are to close.
I can't hear
Private
Suhana.
schools are to close. Public schools, they've already been ordered to close for the 2 weeks after March break, Suhana. Libraries are to close, recreational programs, theaters, movie theaters, all effective immediately, not open today. What stays open are essential services, the Premier confirmed, grocery stores, pharmacies, malls are open for now, although we know in some cities they're operating at reduced hours, like here in Toronto. Public transit still running, offices can remain open, factories can remain open as well. And Doug Ford was saying that's, again, to keep the supply chain going. He explained, you heard a bit in that clip there, of why he declared this state of emergency, essentially saying it's a crucial time. The province needs to take some decisive action to slow the spread of COVID-19 in this province. He says it's not a decision he took lightly. It was made with his cabinet. They talked late last night and early this morning, and he said this was based on advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Ontario, Dr. David Williams. At the same time, in that news conference, Suhana, he talked about financial assistance for those impacted by the state of emergency that's been declared. A lot of businesses in this province will be affected, obviously, a lot of workers. So he talked about a relief package worth $300 million. Earlier, we had heard from the Premier about $100 million. Now it's up to $3 million, and that will be some funding from the federal government. Some of that money, for starters, will go directly to Ontario's healthcare system, buying supplies, he said, as well as hiring healthcare workers like nurses and some doctors, especially to work in rural areas, he talked about. As for specific relief for businesses and sectors impacted by this, he essentially said more details to come in the coming days, that provincial politicians here, members of his cabinet, are in touch with their counterparts in Ottawa. So essentially stay tuned on how some of that money will flow to businesses impacted in this province, Suhana.
And how long do you think, Megan, a declaration like this could last?
Well, for now, the declaration is in place until March 31st, so 2 weeks today, and that is in accordance with sort of the legislation that governs these kinds of things in Ontario. And the Premier, saying at that time, after about 14 days, they will reassess and see what the situation is like then. They may consider an extension of this state of emergency, or they could also decide to terminate it before those 14 days are up. When Ford was asked, how long will people in Ontario be living under these kinds of conditions, he again said he will be taking the advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Ontario. He also, though, did urge Ontarians not to panic. He urged calm. He urged people to stop the sort of panic buying that we've been seeing at some grocery stores and other stores in some cities in this province. He urged people to take care of each other, check in on their neighbors, offer to do groceries for older people or vulnerable people who need assistance. And again, he said he's quite confident in the people of Ontario to comply with these new conditions, and he's also confident that businesses will comply. He was asked about enforcement for bars and restaurants closing today, for example, on St. Patrick's Day, a day that a lot of those establishments count on for their income. He essentially said, Suhana, he hopes it doesn't have to get to that point of having to have bylaw officers out on the streets enforcing these rules, that he's confident everyone will cooperate with these new restrictions.
All right, thanks for that, Megan. We'll check back. That's CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick. She is live at the Ontario Legislature. Let's get a little bit closer into Ontario's bar and restaurant scene. Closures come on what would have been a big day for many businesses. It's St. Patrick's Day, and typically Irish pubs and restaurants, they're packed with party-goers drinking green beer. CBC's Laura McQuillan is on the story. What are you hearing, Laura?
Yeah, there would normally be thousands of people turning out to pubs in Toronto today, Suhanna, and in the streets as well, of course, revelling. But as we heard from the Premier, bars and restaurants are going to be shut until at least the end of the month. And that's except for takeout and delivery. So if anyone was planning to head out for a meal, head out for a drink, well, you won't be able to now. And already looking at the situation in Toronto, you know, this morning when I went to get my cup of coffee from Starbucks, I'll show you what I saw, where you'd normally see lids, straws, things like that. Well, there is nothing left there. Basically, the staff in the store will be giving you any item that you need now. And these are some of the stores that we were looking at yesterday as well. You see St. Patrick's Day signs, but today all going to be shut. Now, of course, this comes after Toronto's Medical Officer of Health announced yesterday that they wanted bars and restaurants to stop serving people inside. We went out and spoke to some Torontonians about their feelings on that, some mixed feelings, and here's what we heard.
I think we need bars. I think of like all the things we need right now, bars feels like. I think that you have to be responsible, and if you've been exposed or if you think like you're getting sick, but otherwise, I don't know. I guess they can't trust people to use their common sense.
I think everyone kind of needs to think beyond themselves and the greater long-term good, and if that means closing down some restaurants and bars, then it's probably for the best.
And this isn't just Toronto that's doing this, Suhanna. Vancouver also announcing yesterday that bars and restaurants are going to be closed just for today, just for St. Patrick's Day. That announcement coming from the Mayor of Vancouver. In fact, on CBC Radio last night, here is what the Mayor, Kennedy Stewart, told us.
There was plans for large St. Patrick's Day celebrations in bars where we might see 10 to 15,000 people in the downtown core in very close proximity. The Chief Medical Health Officer has issued a public health order ordering all bars and restaurants to close for St. Patrick's Day within the downtown core.
So as you can see, there are some real concerns that people will still be congregating. So that's what officials are doing in these two provinces, Ontario and now Vancouver as well, shutting for the day. Now that's only for today in Vancouver, but both following Quebec. It announced on Sunday that it wants bars, nightclubs, restaurants, movie theatres, etc. all to close for the time being. So provinces really taking a lot of action right now to keep people apart, do that social distancing and keep them safe and do what they can to limit the spread of coronavirus. Suhanna.
Thanks for that, Laura.